Thanks for joining us for another edition of Lead.exe. I'm Brian Comerford in Denver, Colorado.
And I'm Nick Lozano in Washington, D.C.
And today we're going to do a little leadership Q&A. And what that means is we're questioning and answering each other.
And
kind of funny to say.
The reason this episode came about is, we were searching for topics. And for anybody who doesn't know me, I create content on LinkedIn, and I've used this one resource when I've been stumped, right? Because just like anything else, like you create content, you can get writer's block, right? Where you talk about one thing so many times and you're like, I don't even remotely know what to say. But you might see a question and it just spurs like inspiration, right? So the resource we're using here is something called answerthepublic.com. This is a pretty cool little website that you can kind of just put like one or two word phrases in here. And for this, we did a leadership, right? Let's pull it out and see what we got and just kind of make an episode from here, right?
Yeah, I like it. It kind of presents you with like a mind map sort of graphic, that if I understand it is culling from some of the top search keywords that are input on this type of topic, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It goes everything down from the who, what, where, when, why, how, down to then comparing. And like you said, I believe it's search terms across Bing and Google and maybe like Quora or something like that. I can't remember where they get their data sources, but basically they're querying a data set. Obviously that's like that. That's like a Google or something where somebody, puts in data looking for questions back.
Okay, great. Well, I love some of what I've seen here. And again, looking at how this is segmented out, who, where, why, how, will, can, right? So let's just grab one of these that seems like a good starting point. I know that one that jumped out for both of us was, can leadership be taught?
Ooh. It's a good one.
It's especially good since it's something that you and I have both been passionate about.
So who's answering that one first, right?
Okay, well, I asked the question,
you want me to go?
You're going first, man.
Okay. Ooh, heat's on me. I only have a podcast and live stream twice a week. I think I can handle myself. Can leadership be taught? And I'm going to answer this very simply and say the answer is yes, right? There might be people might have inherent qualities that make them natural leaders, right? Maybe they're charismatic, they have good communication skills, their emotional intelligence level is high. But just like playing a sport, you can have all that talent, but if you don't put in the work to make yourself better, that talent only means so much up to a certain point. So in my opinion, leadership can totally be learned. It's a learned skill, right? Obviously, there's some skills that you have that are maybe not as lacking. Maybe some people aren't as emotionally intelligent, and that's something you're aware of, and you work on that. But then maybe you also have really good communication skills, right? And you can leverage those more than some of the other ones. So it's a matter of knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and working on them. And it's also, like people always say to work on your weaknesses, which is a good thing, but I don't think enough is stressed on that it's also worth it to work on your strengths too, right?
Absolutely.
You can always be a little bit better in everything. Once you get your weakness up to a certain point, it's worth going back to your strength and revisiting it and brushing up on new skills. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, and I love that you touched on that because StrengthsFinder is one of those, evaluation options that comes to mind that I think of right away. StrengthsFinder, being both a book, but also an exam, and it helps identify, based on your answers, your inputs, your top 5 strengths. And the impetus of the book is to, in fact, rather than trying to solve your weaknesses, go for leveraging your strengths. From a teaching leadership perspective, I mean, it's something that you and I have worked with a couple of partners in our UpPath seminar. Really structuring what are some core leadership principles. How can those be affected regardless of what type of organization that you're in? So do I think that leadership can be taught? Absolutely. In fact, my own trajectory as a leader has always been about being a life learner. And I love, going to other leadership seminars, looking at things like TED Talks online, reading books about leadership, reading a book on Lincoln on leadership right now, and, picking up all sorts of things that are not necessarily within the way that I typically frame my own thinking. But as I learn about why was it important to Lincoln, and what were the situations that he was confronted with at the time, there's a lot to be learned. And so those things all come into a new frame of reference and context, I think, where it does help you build upon your own natural strengths. Some people, I think, tend towards, when you ask the question, are leaders born or are leaders made? I know that you and I have done this in exercises before in a working group where it's almost a 50-50 split in terms of who answers which. And I think you addressed it pretty clearly up front. Yes, there are some, whether it's natural charisma or certain characteristics that help stand out and create that magnetism for someone that inherently creates followership. Then yes, you have been born into some sort of leadership stature for whatever reason that genetics favored you in that way. But for the majority of us, I think leadership is learned, and it's learned from a very early age. And sometimes you can have some very negative characteristics that still factor into your leadership style, but those in fact do become learned characteristics as well.
Yeah, like you said, I think that's a great way to wrap it up. Is like, it's all learning, right? No matter how good you think you are at something, you can always learn more, right? There's always somebody out there who knows more about something than you. So I think it's a great point you made right there. Just always be open to learn and realize that you don't know everything, and just be honest with it, right?
I agree. So let's have you take a stab at finding the next one here.
Let me ask you one here, right?
That's right. Right.
So I was looking there. Okay. So why does leadership matter?
Why does leadership matter? Okay.
Yeah.
It seems like a question that answers itself, but so, we've talked about, the example in extreme ownership that is referenced with the boat races, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got 4 teams, 4 different leaders, each undertaking the same set of tasks. And yet one particular leader continues to outperform all the other boats that are in the same activity, until in that activity, the leader from the top performing team is switched out with the leader from the bottom performing team as an experiment to see, well, what's going to happen here? Is it a matter of leadership, or is it a matter of the effectiveness of the team? And what's the answer, Nick?
It's the leadership, right? that last boat comes in first. Yep.
That's right. That's right. So why leadership matters, and I've said it many times. It's not the thing that I came up with, but leadership is defined by followership. And when you have followers, that means that you are the one who's helping to articulate the objectives, so that everyone is rowing the boat in the same direction, at the same pace, in the same way, towards the same goal. And, being able to effectively take a team, whether it's a team of you as a leader and one other person, or if it's a team of you and, 40 different divisions, the answer is the same. You have to have clear directives. You have to set objectives. You have to inspire people, and you have to give them purpose. So why leadership matters is there's not a lot that would get done if we didn't have leadership in place in some way. I think in terms of, biologically, what has nature done to reinforce these exact same principles? Well, it's pretty clear. We're all born with a set of parents, right? Whether they stick around for the long haul or not is another thing. But there's a reason that we all have elders who help to shape our frame of reference for things. And, that evolutionary move forward is always building upon the knowledge and experience that can be shared from those that are in those senior positions. There's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't matter greatly, and the boat race examples are a really good one. And that book is Extreme Ownership. Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. It's a good read. I mean, you can read it in a weekend. It's a pretty easy read. But in that example, that's a great one, right? You see 2 teams. One team's outperforming all the other boats, and the other team's arguing with each other, yelling at each other, and then you switch the leaders, and you get different results. So it just proves to you that you as a leader, or anybody really, being able to have a positive impact on other individuals to help pull them up to drive the team forward can greatly affect the outcome of the team. You can have a team of a bunch of A-star players, right? But if there's not that, leadership that comes in, somebody help pulling the team together, driving everybody forward, it's really difficult to keep team morale, right? And we seen this recently. Like if you're here in the States, right, the Super Bowl, right, Tom Brady, right, how does that guy go from, the New England Patriots, who everyone thought that was a stacked team, right, and he goes to Florida and Tampa Bay to a team that, wasn't doing as well, was hanging down in the basement for the past couple years, and how does he get inserted basically with the same people and win the Super Bowl? It just shows you right there. It's got to be leadership, right? Because it's same people, just different leader, different result, right? So leadership matters greatly. It matters whether it could be the difference of being effective or ineffective, right?
Yeah, and we'll just wrap that one up by saying the absence of leadership is one of those things that it becomes glaringly obvious, right? When that's a deficiency, when it's a gap, it's something that's clearly known.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, right? When there's a deficiency in an organization, you talk to everybody in the organization and they almost all know it, right? Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is sometimes when you see it, it's everybody who's on the front lines is aware that management, there's no leadership, there's miscommunication. But on the top, sometimes they're just so engulfed in their day-to-day operations that they don't realize what they're doing, but everyone else below them can see it. It's like they can see how ineffective they are. So it matters greatly.
Well, and in that kind of structure, that's to me is one of those things where, as I'm looking at some of these questions, are leadership and management the same? It's clearly not, right? Because the scenario that you just walked us through there, if you have a top level that's so disengaged that they can't see what's obvious to everyone else several layers down, then there's a leadership deficiency right there at the very top.
And here's what I can tell you too, is why leadership matters, right? When you have those deficiencies at the top, but you have people below you who are aware of those deficiencies, sometimes you can have a leader down in the lower ranks who's pulling the weight of the person of above because they just lead up, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, okay, I see this needs to happen, X, Y, and Z, so let's just go out and make this happen, right? Because this is what needs to happen for us to achieve our mission as an organization. So sometimes, that bad leader can be a good thing for people below them because they get a chance to exercise their own leadership skills and find out what they're good at. But long term, the organization, if you have a bad leader at the top, that's not very helpful. But if
you can only manage up for so long.
Yeah, if you're in that situation, take it as an advantage, right? Just lead up as long as you can until either the situation gets better or you gain the experience you need to then go somewhere else and take that talent elsewhere.
That's
Look
exactly
at it as an
right.
Opportunity, right?
Yeah, it can either be a career enhancement or a career limitation. If you're able to leverage negotiating, bringing yourself up into a new role and a new salary basis, then that can be a good thing. And overall, it's a win. If you realize that you've hit the ceiling on where you're being appreciated or where the energy that you're putting into managing up, is being reciprocated, then it's probably time to look at making your exit and finding a place where you can be appreciated. So I want to ask you another one here, Nick. How leadership has changed in 2020? This is an interesting one to me.
Yeah. I think for the people who were in touch with emotional intelligence and communication, who had those skills, leadership didn't change, right? Leadership is still leadership depending on if we're face to face or we're thousands of miles apart or we're, across the world from each other, right? If you're ineffective, in front of people, you're going to be ineffective remotely leading people. There's no difference there, right? And we've talked about it before, that leadership is leadership. But I think what it has made it more apparent is that you don't have the people in front of you, and you need to be, as a leader, more willing to reach out to people to see how they're doing, right? Check in with them. Don't make it, a hey, you're not getting your deliverables done type thing. I mean, how quick is it for us to just hop on a Zoom call real quick and just, talk for 5 minutes? Like, how's your weekend? What's going on? Is there anything I can do for you? Is there anything, any roadblocks that I can get out of your way? I think it's being aware, more emotional intelligence is going to be more important going forward. And once people do get back working in an office, which is going to happen eventually at some point in time, right? But, you could just take those skills that you honed in and bring them back to the office. Because like we've said before, leadership is leadership no matter where we are.
It's true. Something that I have seen is there's been an introduction of some new bad habits that I've come across as I've talked with a number of different organizations and leadership structures within teams. Zoom has had a negative impact in the sense that it's added a new layer of a micromanagement style that I don't know is necessarily helping productivity. But again, the key term there is management, right? We're just discussing our leadership and management, the same thing. Clearly, they're not.
And I just make a great point. We had Brent Williams, who was on like episode 24 or something like that. It was in the 20s. I'll link it in the show notes. But he had a great one line. He's like, you lead people and you manage resources. Don't manage people, manage resources. Lead your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost as if for certain personality types who are in management roles, when they've got direct reports and they've been thrust into this remote operating kind of structure, it's almost like they lean on things like filling up your calendar with a bunch of meetings because it makes them feel like they can keep their finger on the pulse of your productivity, when in fact it's actually becoming an inhibitor to productivity. You're taking away from the valuable time necessary to actually perform work by cluttering it up with a bunch of micromanagement style scrutiny over what is it that you're doing. It's like the TPS reports.
Great points, right? Like the other thing too we can talk about is the mandatory cameras on, mandatory, right? And I get that, especially when we're talking about what happened in 2020, pandemic, everybody working from home, turning the camera, saying that there's an expectation that people turn their cameras on at some point in the meeting is great, but making it mandatory in my thing is a bit excessive, right? I mean, people could be working from home, have their kids, maybe they got to do something with their kid, got to go into the bathroom. If you have a small kid, you might have to go into the bathroom with them and help them, right? So let's turn this requirement off of having to have your camera on. Say, hey, come in, let's have the camera on if you have it available. But if you shut it off, we're not going to start, questioning you where you are, what you're doing, right? Hire people, trust them to get the work done until they give you a reason not to trust them, right? There's no reason to hire people and then micromanage them and think that they're not going to get work done. The easiest way to tell if someone's being effective or not is the work getting done. Are people complaining about deliverables? Then if not, then who cares? Stop looking at that Teams indicator. Stop booking, Zoom meetings, telling people to have their camera on instantly. Like just leave them alone. Let them work.
Yeah, it's interesting. We also have these additional feedback mechanisms like your Office 365 Cortana report, right?
No,
And it shows you your little matrix. Here's your number of quiet days in the month, and here's your average percentage of productivity. And it's just like, well, how would you know? Is it because it's what's on my calendar actually is what elevates to a level of determining whether or not I've been productive? Is it fingers off of the keyboard? Something that I know we've talked about in some of our prior leadership personality profiling discussions, the need for introversion and extroversion. You do things like a DISC assessment, and you end up seeing a matrix where you've got different members of a team whose personality types fall in different areas. Hopefully that's true. Perhaps if you're just dealing with a sales team, you would see all of those sort of line up in more of a very specific kind of way. But if you're dealing with something like an IT department, hopefully you've got a pretty good spread of those personality types across what that matrix looks like, because you need some people who are detail oriented just as much as you need some people who are influencers. And you need some people who want to move fast and have vision and don't necessarily want to get caught up in the details, but they've got someone who can come along and help fill in the gaps and ensure we've got an action plan for all those things that actually have to get done in order to meet this vision. And introversion, I think, is one of those things that tends to get overlooked. It's important to me to actually have some time to disengage, because I need to assimilate a lot of information that's coming into me. I need to take time to reflect on it. And that's where my powers as a strategist really come into play. As long as I have that opportunity to be introverted, even though I think for the most part, I'm an extrovert. So, some of those other, metrics that now fill up your inbox to tell you, what your performance is. I haven't seen those necessarily as being ultimately helpful also.
I've seen those too. And for our podcast, we have the email for the podcast, Office 365. So I see that email like once a month or something like that. And to me, like you said, productivity is relative to each person, right? What I might deem productivity for me, it could mean something completely different for you. We've got this podcast, got a day job, I do a live stream, and you could be like, that's too much. That's not productive for me, right? So it's relative to each person. And some of the telematics that, Microsoft's starting to do with some of the 365 is starting to get a little bit creepy to me. It's almost like email marketing, where like they're tracking opens and all this. And it's like at a certain point, like, why do you want to do that to your employees, right? Like either the work's getting done or it's not getting done. And if it's not getting done, everybody's going to know it's not getting done. So like, why are you going to micromanage them?
That's true.
Maybe it's good to just glance at it and look at it, but that shouldn't be the determining factor for anything at all. And like you said, like, does it go based on your calendar? Because, and a lower level tier 1 IT person is going to have a lot less meetings than someone who's a sales rep that's selling 24/7, right? Like they're going to have a lot less stuff on their calendar. Where the tier 1 support rep's probably going to have nothing on their calendar most of the time.
And yet they're maybe one of the busiest people in the organization.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I brought it up. Like they can spend, for them, an hour on a phone call might be bad or it might be good, right? For a salesperson, that could be terrible, right? They're spending an hour on a phone call with one person. So it's just all relative. And those metrics are there, I guess, for something to look at. But to me, they don't really mean a whole lot. And that was a long tirade, that was a long thing by me. But yeah, as you can tell, I'm not a fan of it. But
well, again, I think it factors into some areas where, from a management perspective, that's not necessarily the most effective way to be managing your resources, right? Again, trust is one of those key principles that if it doesn't exist, you need to figure out how do you imbue that in the team. And in my own experience, if trust is missing from the team, even if it's just a single individual resource within the team, then you have a real issue that's toxic, and it has to be addressed head on. To that point, I want to touch on one other thing that I was just reflecting on in terms of how leadership has changed in 2020. I think about we've really seen a lot of in the media sphere, a lot of these competing realities, like at a level that's been unprecedented. We've had this same sort of challenge between political factions in particular, where you've got either those who are favoring science on one side and those who are naysayers of science, regardless of what your position is on those things. But it's gone from being, like two competing political philosophies to having these competing realities. And part of what I've seen emerge that I actually think is healthy and positive is I've seen a lot of leaders taking a position and calling out things that are clearly not fact-based and challenging a lot of the assumptions around things where it's a little bit squishy, like how truthy is that? So I think that where that is particularly effective and helpful is when you are in a leadership role. It's important to ensure that you're talking about things in a common vocabulary and from a position of a factual basis that everyone agrees upon. Because if you don't have that as a level set agreement, it's kind of like the trust thing, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have a toxic condition that's going to make it difficult for everyone to be rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is being honest when you don't know something, right? Like it can become apparent to people right away when you don't know something, and people are just fluffing stuff out, trying to feel like they have to know the answer. But it's okay to say, I don't know. That's why I have this person on the team here, Joe over here, Jan, or whoever, Mr. Potato Head, Mrs. Potato Head. Yeah, that's a reference to the Mr. Potato Head thing. But it's like, it's just one of those things. That's why you have team members, right? No one person's ever going to know everything about anything. That's why you have a team, and that's why you have team members. Utilize them, let them do their jobs.
Amen to that. Okay, I think I took the last question, so you're going to have to come up with one.
We'll do one more question here. Let me see if I can find a good one, and then we'll wrap it up, right? Man, there's just so many things, and this is just such a great resource for like, if anyone writes content or like you just want to look up an idea. You should
link this in the show notes as well. Yeah, this would be good for folks to be able to have a visual reference of what we're looking at. So
along the same vein, here's a good one, right? How does leadership affect culture? Because we've kind of been talking about this, but
yeah. Well, absolutely. I think it factors in a lot to some of the comments that we've already made, particularly the one where we talked about the absence of leadership, right? That can be felt pretty quickly. When you've got a vacuum of leadership, you've got an organization where the culture is probably in disarray. Mm-hmm. You probably don't have a lot of uniformity in agreement around what the objectives are, because everyone's kind of off, steering their own ship. Mm-hmm. From a cultural perspective, I have seen a couple of different leaders that have been great mentors to me, who've been both effective and ineffective. And part of what I mean by that, and a lot of it goes back to what we're just referring to in terms of truth and operating from a common factual basis. When you have a culture that starts at the top, where honesty is a principle that is safeguarded and cherished, and no matter how uncomfortable, it's always something that ends up being a guiding principle, where you're bringing the conversation back to honesty and maintaining that level of integrity. Because then that is, to me, what inherently governs trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you know somebody is going to be a straight shooter with you at all times, even when it's uncomfortable to you, even when it's uncomfortable to others on the team, but that the outcomes have the intent of let's be as transparent as possible because this is going to help us all improve, versus, sugarcoating something, dancing around something, or being outright dishonest by not bringing those things forward. That has a clear impact on the culture because, to me, that impetus really starts at the top and works its way down. So in one example that I think of specifically, I've seen a culture that took a turn for the dishonest, and it wasn't overt dishonesty. It was just omission of critical information that could have benefited the rest of the organization. And what it did was it created a culture of confusion. And so now you've got, a rumor mill and whisper campaigns that are, just inherently going on at the lower levels of the organization. And that's when it starts to become very difficult to shut those things down because people already feel mistrust. And so if you, even as a middle manager, let's say, come along and say, no, there's more context to this. I can't tell you what it is right now, but I guarantee you there is. Well, they've already lost trust.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to turn it around at that point.
Yeah, I think you made a lot of great points. Someone's just being upfront with your people, right? Do they need to know every single detail, right? But I mean, you at least need to be upfront with them right away and let them know if something's not right, right? Because people can tell. Like, they don't need to wait, till you tell them. A lot of times a rumor mill's running before you say anything. And if you don't say anything, it's just worse because normal time what goes around in the rumor mill is worse than what's actually happening. And you can lose talent that way. Bad leadership hurts teams. It impacts organizations' performance, right? And I think you made a great point too, right? Having a mission statement, right? And have it be like a real mission statement, a real vision statement, not like we want to be the number one, metal manufacturer supplier in the Southeast. That's like an objective, right? That's like something you want to achieve. That's not your mission. So what happens when you become the number one South? Like, what's next, right? But if you have, guiding principles of some type of mission, which is like, hey, we are the most ethically sourced, commercial manufacturing company. We source all of our, equipment from fair trade, all our metal from fair trade miners in South America or something along that lines, right? Then that's a guiding principle, and everybody below them knows, okay, everything we do is fair trade. So I need to make sure that every contract I'm signing, that everything goes down through because this is what we're built on. And I think a lot of organizations miss that, right? They get stuck in some strategic, some overall arching number objective, being some market player, instead of figuring out what it is they really help people do or what it is they really do.
It's a great segue into the, the second example that I was going to use with another mentor of mine. Her approach was one that I just really resonated with. I respected it tremendously. It played to my strengths, which is probably part of why, it resonated so strongly. But it's one that I've emulated a lot with some of my own teams, which is to undergo strategic planning exercises by bringing in a vision and starting at that very high level. And as the leader, establishing that vision. Here is my vision. Now let's all discuss as a team, what are the underlying objectives that are going to drive us to fulfilling that? And what it does is, number one, it empowers everyone who's on the team. Now you've all been equalized with the ability to ideate together, right? You're all contributing at the same level, and your contributions are more than just saying, I'm building a widget. It's, no, I'm actually one of the enablers behind curating this strategic vision, and that develops a level of camaraderie where, I think it's safe to say people take pride in their work when they feel like they've got a sense of ownership in something. And whether or not you've got an employee ownership structure at your company, granting people the ownership of being able to contribute the most important part of themselves, which are their ideas, their imagination, right? Their ability to imagineer, right along with whatever those guiding principles and that driving vision are. Those end up being things to me that, it's invaluable to strengthening a team, and the resonance that then permeates the entire culture around it. You can feel that energy when you walk into organizations where that kind of dynamic is at work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you make a great point. And for anyone who wants a good rundown on it, Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why is a great way to figure out, get you thinking about different organizations and how they look at their business, right? He goes through like Southwest and like Disney World and like, I can't remember all the examples in there, but he goes through a bunch of business cases and he was like, look, this is the reason why, people, follow these organizations. Everything from a small organization to like elite military teams to, a mom and pop shop. The reason why they're successful. And it's because they know their why. They understand it.
Amen to that. Yeah, love it.
I guess with that, I mean, that's a pretty decent episode, man.
We even got to end with a reference to a book.
Oh, we did. Randomly.
That's right. Well done.
Yeah, appreciate it, Brian. With that, we'll just wrap it up. And I guess the one thing we haven't been doing the whole time we've done this is, asking people if they like, Lead.exe to just go ahead and leave us a review on whatever platform you listen to this. If it's good, leave it. If you think we're bad, leave it. We just want to hear feedback either way. So if you could leave us a review and rate us and share with somebody you think who might enjoy it, we'd appreciate that, right?
Absolutely.
And if anyone's looking to get a hold of me, you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Just search for Nick Lozano on LinkedIn. You'll find me. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, same. LinkedIn is the place to find me. And, before LinkedIn, I believed my name was actually a unique one. Since the days of the inception of LinkedIn, realized that there's about 50 other Brian Comerfords. Fortunately, I was
you're
the first one to have a profile on LinkedIn. So I tend to show up at the top level of the search.
I'm literally in the process of, like, if anyone's still listening to this is funny, but I'm still in the process. I'm rebranding some of my social media to like just Ronan Janitor, because if you Google that, I can come up in the top. But if you Google Nick Lozano, there's like 5,000 of them. It's like, so I'm just kind of rolling with it, embracing the brand. It's like, hey,
there's no doubt.
That's how people can find you, man. It's like the name doesn't matter if people can find you, man.
Ronan Janitor. That's OG.
There you go. Yeah, it is, man.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
All right. With that, we'll thank everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.